There was a time when Kody Brown believed silence meant control. When the argument stopped, when the wives stopped pushing back, when the cameras caught fewer raised voices, he convinced himself it was peace. But peace was never what settled over Flagstaff. What settled was decay. Slow, quiet, and invisible, until suddenly it wasn't. Insiders say the shift didn't come with a dramatic explosion or a screaming match. It came with small behaviors. Short answers, locked phones, long pauses where affection used to live. And while fans were distracted by Christine's happiness and Janelle's independence, something far more dangerous was happening behind closed doors. The final marriage was cracking, and the man who built his entire identity on being chosen was about to learn how disposable he really was. Kody told himself he had survived the worst. Mary was gone emotionally. Christine walked away without looking back. Janelle stopped pretending, but Robyn stayed. And in Kody's mind, that meant everything. She was proof that loyalty still existed. Proof that obedience was rewarded. Proof that his authority hadn't been rejected completely. The house they shared wasn't just a home. It was a trophy. Every expensive painting, every shelf overflowing with collectibles, every unnecessary purchase was a quiet message to the world. I won. But trophies rot when no one applauds them, and the McMansion slowly turned into a vault filled with resentment, not security. Kody grew angrier as the attention shifted away from him. The audience stopped sympathizing. The narrative slipped out of his hands. And worst of all, the wives he expected to fail without him didn't. Christine laughed louder than ever. Janelle traveled freely. Mary rebuilt herself brick by brick. Their joy felt like mockery. And Kody, who survives on validation, began to suffocate in a world where his approval no longer mattered. He paced. He ranted. He obsessed over betrayal. He rewrote history so often that even he couldn't tell where truth ended and ego began. Robyn watched this unraveling up close. She listened to the same grievances on repeat. She absorbed his bitterness, his paranoia, his need to be seen as a victim rather than the architect of his own collapse. And something inside her shifted. The woman who once cried on cue, who spoke softly and played the role of fragile peacemaker, began pulling away emotionally. She stopped reassuring him the way she used to. She started talking about finances, about protecting herself, about how unstable everything felt. Kody heard those words, but didn't register the warning. He was too busy convincing himself that Robyn needed him just as much as he needed her. What Kody didn't understand was that Robyn had already started preparing for a life where she wouldn't need to soothe him anymore. She traveled more. She guarded her phone. She laughed at messages he wasn't part of. And when he asked, she always had an explanation ready. Business. Stress. Family matters. Kody accepted every excuse because questioning her meant questioning the foundation of his entire worldview. If Robyn wasn't loyal, then nothing he sacrificed meant anything. And Kody Brown was not ready to face a reality where he wasn't the prize. Meanwhile, miles away from Flagstaff, Christine's new life was unfolding in full color. No tension, no fear, no constant emotional labor, just ease. Her relationship with David Woolley didn't revolve around power or obedience. It revolved around partnership. And every photo, every laugh, every glimpse of genuine happiness landed like a quiet revenge Kody never saw coming. He dismissed it publicly, but privately it gnawed at him. Not because he missed Christine, but because her freedom proved something terrifying. Life after Kody wasn't punishment. It was relief. That's when fate stepped in with a twist so cruel it felt deliberate. Because Christine's happiness didn't just exist at a distance. It moved closer. Closer than Kody could ever imagine. David Woolley wasn't a stranger drifting on the edge of this story. He was deeply connected. Family connections. Social circles. Conversations that overlapped. And in those overlapping spaces, something surfaced that should never have existed at all. According to insiders, David was shown messages that didn't sit right. Messages from a woman describing her marriage as suffocating. A woman complaining about an angry husband who blamed everyone else for his failures. A woman who spoke about wanting freedom, validation, and escape. At first, David didn't recognize her. But then he saw the photo. And everything stopped. Because staring back at him wasn't a stranger. It was Robyn Brown. The realization hit like ice water. This wasn't gossip. This wasn't speculation. This was evidence. Screenshots. Messages. Digital intimacy that crossed lines Kody never believed Robyn would cross. David understood the gravity instantly. He knew staying silent would protect privacy, but enable deception. And he also knew that exposing it publicly would turn this into a spectacle. So he chose a third option. One that would change everything. David called Kody. Kody was driving through Flagstaff when the phone rang. An unfamiliar number. He almost ignored it, but something made him answer. And when David introduced himself, the air shifted. The conversation wasn't aggressive. It wasn't emotional. It was calm, measured, controlled. David told him what he knew, told him what he'd seen, told him he was sending the screenshots. Then he hung up. Kody pulled over. For a long moment, he didn't move. His hands trembled. His stomach dropped. Denial surged first, fast and desperate. Then he opened the messages. And with every line he read, the world he built collapsed inward. Robyn's words weren't defensive. They weren't cautious. They were intimate, familiar, resigned. She spoke about being trapped, about Kody's anger, about wanting something different. And in one image, one careless, damning image, she blew a kiss meant for someone who wasn't her husband. When Kody confronted her, there was no breakdown, no tears, no frantic denial. Robyn didn't perform.
She didn't beg.
She didn't apologize the way he expected. Instead, she turned the mirror on him. She told him he'd become unbearable, that the family fell apart because of his obsession with control, that she stayed longer than she should have. And in that moment, something inside Kody shattered that could never be repaired. Because he finally understood the truth he had spent years avoiding. Robyn didn't stay because she loved him. She stayed because he was useful. And now he wasn't.
Kody didn't sleep that night.
He sat alone in the dark, replaying every message, every word Robyn had written to someone else, over and over until the screen blurred. Betrayal didn't hit him like sadness. It hit him like humiliation. For years, he had justified everything in Robyn's name. Every wife he dismissed, every child he emotionally distanced himself from, every boundary he bulldozed was done under the belief that loyalty mattered, that sacrifice mattered. And now the one woman he elevated above all others had quietly dismantled him with a phone and a smile he never saw coming. By morning, Kody wasn't thinking like a husband. He was thinking like a man whose identity had been stripped away. He left the McMansion without ceremony, without closure, and without a plan. The RV on Coyote Pass became his refuge, not because it offered comfort, but because it offered isolation. Inside that cramped space, surrounded by land that symbolized everything he promised and never delivered, Kody stewed in resentment. He told himself Robyn was ungrateful, that the women broke him, that the world turned on him unfairly. Accountability never crossed his mind. Revenge did. Robyn, meanwhile, didn't chase him. She didn't call. She didn't plead. According to insiders, she moved with chilling efficiency. Boxes appeared. Inventory lists were made. Financial documents shifted hands. What once looked like chaos inside the house now looked strategic. Every item had a value. Every decision served a purpose. This wasn't a woman caught in an emotional spiral. This was a woman extracting herself from a sinking ship before it pulled her under. As Kody spiraled outward, Robyn turned inward, protecting herself and her children. Friends noticed her tone change. Less apologetic, more resolved. She spoke about doing what's best and securing stability, language that sounded less like marriage and more like preparation. And while Kody burned in isolation, Robyn was quietly building a lifeboat. But Kody couldn't accept being discarded. Not by Robyn. Not after everything. And in his desperation to feel powerful again, his mind returned to an old strategy. If he couldn't control the wives, he would control the narrative. And if the narrative couldn't be reclaimed publicly, it would be reclaimed privately, through the people he knew could still be influenced. Mary Brown became the next target. Mary had already survived Kody's rejection. She had endured years of emotional neglect, public humiliation, and quiet erasure. What Kody didn't expect was her rebirth. In Parawan, Mary wasn't begging for validation. She was running a business, hosting guests, laughing again. And more importantly, she wasn't alone. A man had entered her life not as a rescuer, but as a partner. Someone who showed up without conditions. Someone who stayed without demanding obedience. His presence was steady, unassuming, and deeply threatening to a man who equated love with control. Kody didn't confront Mary directly. That would have required honesty. Instead, he went for something far more destructive.
He went for Leon.
The call came late. Kody's voice was softer than it had been in years. Concern replaced anger. He framed the conversation as protection. He spoke about Mary's new relationship with unease. He emphasized the last name, Jessup. He let the implication hang in the air without ever stating it outright. He reminded Leon of past pain, past chaos, past narratives he himself had carefully constructed. He planted doubt and let fear do the rest. Leon listened. And because love makes us vulnerable to manipulation, the seed took root. Leon drove to Parawan believing they were stepping into danger, not realizing they were walking straight into a trap. The conversation with Mary was explosive. Accusations flew. Trust wavered. Old wounds reopened with brutal efficiency. Mary watched her child question her judgment, her safety, her choices, and she recognized the tone instantly. It wasn't Leon's voice. It was Kody's. The damage was immediate and devastating. Years of healing collapsed in a single afternoon. Mary retreated inward, blaming herself, questioning everything she had built. Kody, alone in his RV, felt something he hadn't felt in weeks. Control. But control is fragile when it's built on lies. Leon didn't feel relief after confronting Mary. They felt unsettled. The narrative Kody offered didn't fully align with reality. Too many gaps. Too many emotional manipulations disguised as concern. And when doubt crept in, Leon did something Kody never anticipated. They reached out to Christine. Christine didn't hesitate. She didn't dramatize. She didn't soften the truth. She told Leon about Flagstaff, about the McMansion, about Robyn, about the messages, about the call from David, about the collapse Kody was desperately trying to hide. And in that moment, the fog lifted. Leon saw the pattern. Kody's pain wasn't being processed, it was being weaponized. The realization hit hard. Guilt followed. Anger followed faster. And for the first time, Leon understood that their confrontation with Mary hadn't been an act of protection. It had been an act of manipulation. One that nearly destroyed a relationship already scarred by years of emotional neglect. As Leon pulled away from Kody, the isolation he feared became reality. The OG wives, once divided, once cautious around each other, began reconnecting through shared clarity. Conversations flowed. Stories aligned. The same patterns emerged again and again. Kody wasn't a misunderstood patriarch. He was a man who demanded loyalty while offering none in return. And while Kody's grip weakened, the financial pressure intensified. Coyote Pass sat untouched. No homes. No progress. Just land payments and broken promises. The collectibles Kody hoarded, once symbols of wealth, became evidence of desperation. Assets without liquidity. Value trapped in objects no one wanted. The empire wasn't just emotionally bankrupt. It was financially exposed. Robyn knew this. That's why she moved when she did. As Kody raged in isolation, Robyn finalized her escape. She wasn't fleeing chaos. She was leaving a man who could no longer protect her future. And when the trucks finally pulled away, carrying pieces of a life she once defended publicly, Kody watched from a distance, powerless to stop it. He told himself this wasn't the end. but deep down, he knew. Everything he touched turned to dust. By the time Kody realized how far the damage had spread, it was already too late to contain it. What he believed were isolated betrayals were, in reality, connected fractures radiating outward from the same source. Him. Conversations he wasn't part of were happening. Truths he could no longer edit were circulating. And the most dangerous thing for a man obsessed with control wasn't anger or confrontation. It was clarity. The OG wives weren't plotting revenge. They were comparing notes. And once that started, Kody's version of history collapsed under its own weight. Christine had become the unexpected anchor. The woman he once dismissed as dramatic and needy now spoke with calm authority. When Janelle questioned her own memories, Christine filled in the gaps. When Mary doubted her instincts, Christine validated them. Piece by piece, the fog lifted. What once felt like personal failure began to look like systemic manipulation. Kody didn't lose his wives because they were disloyal. He lost them because they stopped believing his narrative. Janelle, who had always handled finances with practical detachment, began revisiting old numbers. Accounts that never quite balanced. Investments that were promised but never materialized. Coyote Pass stood out like a scar. Years of payments. No progress. No infrastructure. No accountability. The dream Kody sold them had been emotionally expensive, but now it was financially devastating. Janelle realized something chilling. The family wasn't just broken. It had been mismanaged into a corner with no exit. While Kody remained fixated on emotional betrayal, the real threat was unfolding quietly in spreadsheets and property records. The collectibles he once bragged about weren't assets. They were liabilities. Money locked into objects with inflated sentimental value, but no reliable resale market. The McMansion wasn't a symbol of stability. It was a financial anchor dragging everything down. And the worst part was that Kody didn't seem to understand any of it. He still spoke in grand visions. Still promised futures he had no means to build. Robyn understood. That's why her detachment wasn't emotional. It was strategic. She didn't argue publicly. She didn't defend herself online. She let Kody self-destruct while she prepared. Insiders say she consulted quietly, asked the right questions, made sure her name was protected where it needed to be. The woman once framed as fragile had become methodical. She wasn't reacting to chaos. She was anticipating fallout. Kody noticed her absence more than her actions. He ranted about abandonment, about disloyalty, about how everyone turned against him. But the truth was more humiliating. Robyn didn't leave in anger. She left in certainty. And nothing wounds a man like realizing he was assessed, calculated, and found lacking. The cameras captured pieces of his unraveling. Rambling monologues. Wild gestures toward empty land. Conversations that circled without landing anywhere meaningful. He spoke about respect, about betrayal, about sacrifice, but never about repair. Never about responsibility. Viewers didn't see a leader fighting for his family. They saw a man shouting into a void he created himself. As public perception shifted, the pressure mounted. Kody wasn't just losing his family. He was losing the audience. Sympathy evaporated. Criticism sharpened. The image he once curated fractured under scrutiny. And for the first time, Kody couldn't redirect blame fast enough to escape it. Mary felt the shift too. After the confrontation with Leon, after the painful realization of manipulation, she didn't retreat this time. She stood her ground. Conversations with Leon became honest. Apologies were exchanged. Healing resumed, slower but stronger. Kody's attempt to isolate her backfired completely. Instead of returning to him for reassurance, Mary stepped further away. The irony was brutal. Every tactic Kody used to regain control accelerated his isolation. And then came the final blow, financial exposure. When details about unpaid plans, stalled developments, and questionable financial priorities surfaced, the illusion of patriarchal competence collapsed. Kody wasn't a visionary whose dreams failed because of disloyal wives. He was a man who overpromised, underdelivered, and refused to adapt. The empire didn't fall because it was attacked. It fell because it was hollow. Coyote Pass became the perfect metaphor. Bought impulsively, showcased proudly, abandoned quietly. No homes, no future, just land and resentment baking under the Arizona sun. Kody stood there often, gesturing at nothing, still pitching dreams to people who no longer listened. Meanwhile, Robyn's exit neared completion. The house echoed. Rooms emptied. The silence grew heavier. What once felt like sanctuary now felt like aftermath. And Kody, finally forced to confront the wreckage without buffers or allies, felt something unfamiliar. Irrelevance. No wife waiting. No child calling. No plan forming.
Just consequences settling in.
And as the dust cleared, one truth became impossible to ignore. Kody Brown didn't lose his family in a single moment. He lost them one demand at a time. By the time the separation became undeniable, there was no explosion left to film. No screaming matches. No dramatic exits. Just absence. Robyn's voice no longer echoed through the house. Her children's routines no longer revolved around Kody. The McMansion, once framed as the reward for obedience, became a hollow structure filled with reminders of everything that failed. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was accusatory. Every empty room reflected a decision Kody made when he believed loyalty could be demanded instead of earned. Robyn's departure wasn't framed as abandonment. It was framed as necessity. According to those close to her, she didn't speak about betrayal or heartbreak. She spoke about survival, about stability, about protecting her children from a man who had become unpredictable, bitter, and consumed by resentment. She didn't villainize Kody publicly because she didn't need to. His behavior did that for her. The man who once positioned himself as the emotional center of the family now stood on the outside, watching everyone move on without him. Kody tried to reassert control in the only way he knew how, through words.
He talked about respect.
About loyalty. About how everything would have worked if people had just listened. But the words rang hollow. There was no audience left that believed him. Even the cameras seemed to pull back, capturing him smaller, more isolated, framed against vast empty spaces that swallowed his presence instead of amplifying it. The visual metaphor was impossible to miss. The patriarch without a family. The leader without followers. The dream without believers. Coyote Pass became his refuge and his prison. He returned there often, walking the land like a man revisiting a memory that no longer belonged to him. This was supposed to be the legacy. The place where generations would gather. The land that justified every sacrifice. Instead, it remained untouched, unfinished, and unforgiving. Weeds replaced blueprints. Dust replaced hope. The land didn't care about his intentions.
It only reflected his inaction.
Meanwhile, the women he once claimed could never survive without him were thriving in ways that required no explanation. Christine lived loudly, unapologetically, surrounded by warmth instead of tension. Janelle reclaimed her independence, her clarity, her peace. Mary rebuilt not just her business, but her sense of self, learning that love doesn't need to be earned through endurance. They didn't unite out of spite. They united through understanding, through shared experiences that finally made sense once Kody's influence was removed. And that was the final cruelty.
Kody didn't just lose his family.
He lost the narrative. The story no longer centered him as the misunderstood hero. It reframed him as the common denominator, the control,
The ego.
the refusal to evolve, the cracks that formed everywhere he stood too firmly in his own righteousness. Financial reality closed in quietly but relentlessly. Without shared income, without collective belief, without momentum, the illusion of abundance collapsed. The collectibles sat untouched. The land remained unpaid in purpose, if not in money. The lifestyle Kody defended so fiercely became unsustainable without the women who once carried it. He didn't fall from grace. He aged out of relevance. Robyn, now fully separated, didn't look back publicly. She didn't need to rewrite history because she was no longer living in it. Her survival wasn't loud. It was efficient. And that, more than anger or betrayal, was what truly destroyed Kody. He wasn't worth the fight anymore. In the end, there was no dramatic conclusion, no courtroom spectacle, no screaming confession, just a man standing alone on land he never built on, talking about dreams no one planned to share with him anymore. The cameras captured him mid-sentence more than once, trailing off as if even he realized the story had moved on. Sister Wives didn't end with a bang. It ended with clarity. A family built on control collapsed when control was no longer tolerated. A patriarch who demanded loyalty lost it when loyalty stopped being mistaken for love. And the women who were once told they needed him proved, quietly and conclusively, that they never did. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the end of the illusion that held everything together.